My name is Jeff Luna. I see familiar faces on here. All of you know, I'm the admissions coordinator here at Holly Hall. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our Tuesday talk for May, oh my gosh, it's the 18th today. We're already halfway through the month. Today's talk is The Force Behind the Forces, the History and Future of the USO. It's going to be a very exciting talk. I'm excited for this one with Memorial Day coming up. So I would like to welcome our presenter, Loren Westerfield. She is the Executive Director of the USO here in Houston. And it looks like she's getting about ready to set up. And so we will go ahead and I will get started. We'll get started and I'm going to turn it over to Loren. So welcome, Loren.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much. Sorry, guys.
Loren, you have your cell phone and another recording on. You have to turn something off.
Nothing but fun over here. Hi, everyone. I'm Loren Westerfield. I'm the Executive Director of the USO here in Houston, and I'm really looking forward to sharing my love of the USO with you all. So, oh, it does have you up. Okay. And how do I request control? Here we go. This hopefully will work. That work? All right. Now, if only I can get the video to work, this will be great. All right, welcome everyone. I'm Loren Westerfield, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you the history of the USO, the past, present, and future. So a little bit about me. My name is Loren Westerfield, like Sophia Loren, and I'm the Executive Director of the USO here in Houston. I'm also an Army veteran. I spent 5 years with the 101st Airborne Division out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And currently I'm a military spouse as well. My husband has 17 years in the Army and is serving in the Texas Army National Guard. On top of being the director of the USO for the past almost 6 years now. So the history of the USO started in 1941. The USO is a nonprofit, non-governmental, nonpartisan organization that relies on the support of volunteers and donors. So that means we're not a part of the government. We don't get funded by the government. We do get a governmental grant, but the majority of our support comes from patriotic Americans and volunteers who decide to spend their time, talent, and treasure with the USO, supporting those troops and their families throughout their time in service. All right, let's see if this will work. Doesn't look like it's making any sound, huh? It doesn't talk, so I guess it's okay. So this is just a little bit about what the USO does now and where we came from. The USO turned 80 years old this year. So for 8 decades, the USO and our staff and volunteers have been supporting the frontline service members across the world. Whether it's connecting via telephone or email, connecting with USO canteens that travel USO mobiles across the country and across the world. The USO is there by their side from the moment that they swear in and enlist, through the deployments, and then transitioning home again. It's really neat to see the history coupled with the current use of the USO by DoD. Awesome. So a little bit about our past. The USO, like I said, was congressionally chartered under the directive of FDR, the president at the time, in February of 1941. There were 6 organizations that were already providing travel and entertainment support. So you can see those there on the right-hand side: the YMCA, the YWCA, the National Catholic Community Service, the National Jewish Welfare Board, the National Travelers Aid Association, and the Salvation Army. So those 6 organizations came together in order to form the United Service Organizations. So a lot of people know the USO, but they don't always know what it actually stands for. So those 6 organizations came together to form the USO. And there is one of our original centers. There were USO locations, USO dances that went on across the nation and across the world. So you'll probably recognize that guy in the top photo. He's been the iconic figure of the USO almost since the beginning. Bob Hope, of course. He personally held hundreds of Christmas shows and camp shows across World War II, Vietnam, and all the way into the war in the Southwest Asia that we are still working through. So looks like from 1941 to 1947, so really with the World War II, there were over 428,000 live camp shows, which is really amazing when you think about how many days that is and how many performances would have to happen per day in order to reach that number. The official first USO canteen, which means the actual physical location of the USO, it started with camp shows and support that way, was opened in Rome in 1944. Once the war was over in 1947, the USO actually stood down for a few years until 1950, when the United States entered the Korean War. And it was deemed that the USO was necessary again. And from then on, we have continued to support the troops and their families, whether we're at war or at peace, home and abroad, every way that we can ever since then. So just a short break in service and then continued on. So the USO's mission statement is to strengthen America's military service members by keeping them connected to family, home, and country throughout their service to the nation. That means that wherever they go, whatever they need, the USO is an agile force. So it started with travel and entertainment support, and now we continue that with supporting service members through transition. We support family members who are left home when service members are on deployment, and everything in between. So that was a little bit about the history of the USO, bringing us to the present. So the USO in present day has over 250 locations across the world and serve over 8 million annually. So there's only 2.2 million service members, but you think about each service member averages about 2.5 dependents, and many of them visit the USO multiple times throughout the year. Our programming focuses currently, much like the travel and entertainment support of our history, are to unite, deliver, entertain, and transition. Go into a little bit more depth on that. With the map, you can see that we actually have physical locations on 4 continents. There is one in Africa that you can't really see. We don't have a physical location in South America, Australia, or Antarctica, but we do actually send USO to go units to all of those locations to troops that are based there. So the USO does say they support all 7 continents of the world. So our first pillar, keeping them connected through the USO Unites. The USO creates and maintains strong connections. So we're connecting family members and service members with all of the things that they have chosen to fight for and to support with their time in service. With programs like Operation Phone Home, while I was deployed, I was able to call home from a USO center. I had a 5-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old, as well as my husband, that were home when I was deployed. And being able to call home or video home when the world doesn't stop at home, even though you feel like it should when you're deployed. So being able to call home was absolutely a godsend for our deployed troops. We also do military spouse programming, giving military spouses the chance to connect as they transfer to different duty stations. We have the Bob Hope Legacy Reading Program, where service members can actually read a book on video to their children, and the USO then sends that video program and the book to their child for them to keep forever. Also, Operation Special Delivery, so being away from your family members when you're pregnant as a military spouse or a military member makes it hard for you to have a baby shower. And so the USO provides a special baby shower for those expecting mothers through our special delivery program. And the author, Heidi Murkoff, who wrote What to Expect When You're Expecting. So she goes around the world actually to different USO locations, which is very cool. Our next pillar is the USO Delivers. So as I was saying, the USO To Go, we actually send USO items and video gaming systems and entertainment type devices to service members wherever they are. So whether they are deployed to a place where there is no USO or are on a ship, and there's obviously no USO for the Navy on our ships, the USO is able to be there by their side. So we can say that we're always by their side because we go wherever they go. The mobile USO we actually use quite a bit here in Texas and in the Gulf area because of our hurricanes and the support of our Coast Guard and National Guard members who are activated during those times. So our mobile USO actually shows up wherever those service members are located and brings programming to them while they're activated and supports them that way. Care packages also get deployed overseas or handed to service members as they arrive on a duty station. Just want to make sure I'm not on mute. Am I on mute? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great.
Yeah.
It had that box around Martin. So I was like, oh, for the love, please tell me I haven't been talking for 5 minutes and nobody could hear me. Thanks, Francis. You are awesome. All right. So the next pillar is the USO Entertain. So this is one of our historical programming pillars through USO camp shows, MVP programming that we have had multiple celebrities interact with service members directly through programs like this on Zoom. Celebrity visits at different bases and concerts, of course, and then of course the NFL, MLB, and NBA often send over Super Bowl winners and things to meet with the troops and participate in what they're doing. This gives our troops a chance to remember what they're fighting for and brings a sense of home, whether that's Hollywood home or NFL home or Major League Baseball, which is, the heart of the American spirit. It brings that chance to connect our service members back to that family, home, and country. And then last is our USO Transition. So transitioning military members, whether they've served 3 years or 33 years, back into the civilian population through resume writing and interview preparation, PCS support. So as military spouses get moved from New York to Texas and up to Washington State, being able to connect them with programs that help them find jobs or help them find homes or find school systems for their children. Of course, we also continuously support the families of the fallen. Any service member who has been killed in action through their time in service, the USO stands by to support their families for the rest of their lives. The USO Warrior and Family Centers are for wounded, ill, and injured service members, and the USO provides support at those locations in Bethesda, Maryland, and in San Antonio, Texas. That's a very broad view of what the USO does across the world now, presently and historically. So I'll bring your attention here to Houston, since that is where I get to serve. The map might look very small, but I'm sure you can see the circles that indicate the different loops around Houston. You can see that we have USO locations at Bush Intercontinental Airport, at Hobby Airport, downtown at MEPS, where the recruits actually go to swear in and ship off to basic training, and at our reserve base at Ellington Field. The stars on the map actually represent units that the USO supports. So we have quite a few units that have their base of locations at Ellington Field. And then we also have Coast Guard sectors and reserve armories across the greater Houston area, up through Bryan College Station, Beaumont, down to Victoria, and quite a few in Galveston. Here in the greater Houston area, we have an estimated about 10,500 active service members, most of them being National Guard and Reserves, but some of them also being active duty for being recruiters or Coast Guard who ensure that our Port of Houston is safe. And that is actually a large amount, not compared to Fort Hood that has 50,000 service members, but compared to an Air Force base, it's about the same amount. So a lot of people don't realize that we have that many service members that are actually based here in Houston. This is our staff. So we serve over 200,000 service members with 4 staff members. So how do we do that? We have 250 dedicated volunteers who work at the airports 365 days a year, and at MEPS and at Ellington, supporting the different programs that we have there at those locations. So the 4 of us, we get split up quite a bit. So having one picture with 4 of us in it is pretty rare. But generally speaking, I get to serve as the director. We have a programs manager, Speedy Esperidion Zuniga, and 2 center operations supervisors who support all of those volunteers and ensure that we have all the supplies that we need to support those service members and their families. So these show off some of the local volunteer opportunities. You can see Wings Over Houston there on the top left. You can see a trunk or treat on the bottom left where the kids from the military come in. Our airport center, that's Bush Intercontinental in the bottom middle. There's a outreach event at Hobby Airport on that top middle. MEPS, which is the military entrance processing station, where the recruits actually come to do their testing, swear in, and then ship off to basic training on the top right. And then another outreach event there at the bottom left that looks like one of our kids' camps. You'll see all of those people that are in those photos are volunteers. So those are not USO staff because we can't be everywhere. So if you're interested in getting involved with the USO or finding out more about what you can do, we do need you to serve. As I said, we have over 250 volunteers, but also, so volunteering is one way you can get involved with the Speakers Bureau. So hopefully we'll have more talks like this from people that are not just me in the near future, but I love doing this, but I can't, like I said, be everywhere. So whether it's a Rotary Club or a Lions Club or other retirement communities, getting out into the community is imperative because so many people don't even know what the USO is, what the USO does, and why it's important as a bridge between the military and the civilian population. Additionally, sharing the information about what the USO is on, whether you're on social media or sharing a newsletter or just sharing in person with other people. Hey, I found out this cool thing about the USO and what they do. If you ever want to get involved with serving and supporting our military, here's a great way. And then lastly, giving in any way, shape, or form, a donation to USO, whether it's monthly or annually, or you become a legacy giver that passes on a portion of your estate to the USO. We here in Houston raise about $500,000 a year, so just over $2.50 per person that we serve. Give or take, depending on the location. So we're extremely efficient when it comes to being a nonprofit. So much, almost all of our money goes to the actual mission because we get so many donations in kind. We don't have to pay for the space in the airport, thank goodness, that we are given to be able to support. So even small gifts and of course large gifts do a lot to support those military members as they come through our centers and appreciate what the USO does to support them. And that takes us to the end. A little short. Yeah, ready for questions if you guys have any.
I do. I have one.
Yes.
For like the troops for the service members that come back and surprise their loved ones. Like I saw one this morning at a graduation.
Yes.
I'm about to start crying again.
Yes.
Are y'all involved with that too? Or?
Sometimes. So we actually this past weekend, if you watched the Astros game at all, or if you were at the Astros game on Friday, we brought about 250 family members out to the game. So tickets donated through the Astros Foundation for them. And they were all family members of loved ones who are deployed to Egypt right now. So we were able to do a surprise video of those members that are overseas saying thank you to their families for continuing to support them while they're overseas. Thanks for USO and the Astros Foundation for giving their families an opportunity to do something fun. And sometimes when it comes to those kind of things, like the graduations, usually those are just done within the family themselves, okay. Because if you get too many people knowing about the surprise, you end up losing the element of surprise. Right. But I did a surprise for my kids when my husband got home. It was on Christmas Eve, and I had wrapped a huge box. It was like a dryer box or something, and they thought it was a monster truck, and it was my husband in there. They were 2 and 4 at the time. So very special, but mostly those things are usually done just on a personal level, but it can be supported by the USO and organizations like that.
And I guess another question I have also, supporting the troops when they come back, especially, we hear a lot about traumatic brain injuries. Sure. Or PTSD. Yeah. Is that something that y'all also contribute or assist with them finding help and assistance if they need?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a ton of programs, and a lot of times the difficulty is navigating those programs. So being able to, here in Houston, we have a wonderful program called Camp Hope and the PTSD Foundation, but the VA has programs across the nation, actually across the world. There's US VAs in certain countries outside of the US. And that Wounded and that Warrior Family program that is supported by the USO. So those are for folks that have been injured in some way, shape, or form. So through our transition program, we help those service members before they leave the military, because if you get medically retired early because you have a traumatic brain injury or PTSD or whatever, we ensure that if they go through our program, that they find the help that they need and that they are plugged into those programs locally, because Fort Hood is going to have different programs available than Houston, and of course, across the US. Although we do have a very large veteran population here in Houston. It's supposed to be the second largest in the US. Yeah, right after LA.
Wow.
Yeah, great question.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the group? I kind of have a little personal story. I don't know how personal it is, but one of my friends, he had a friend who was actually Bob Hope's assistant.
Oh my goodness.
So
That's amazing.
yeah, so when I found that out, I was like, oh my gosh.
How funny.
Super, like you hear all the stories about Bob Hope. Very nice. I mean, it's all true.
Yeah.
And a great person, you know. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but
Right.
you know, so that's my connection, I guess, to Bob Hope.
Yeah.
I guess 3 degrees.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess.
No, that's pretty good. That's and the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation are still giving to the USO, and you heard me say the Bob Hope Legacy Reading Program, and so that's one of the programs that they fund through, you know, kids and reading and continuing on with that legacy of Bob Hope, which is just awesome. All of these years later, to know that he's still giving back to the troops.
Yeah.
Did you know that he's British and not American?
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's like fun fact. He was actually English, and of course, you know, Hollywood being so big in the entertainment space, he was here in the U.S. and impressed with what the troops were doing, and of course, going over to support his native England in their war. And so he decided to make that his mission for his life. Yeah, cool.
Wow. Learn something new every day.
Yeah. That's how you do these things, right? Well, awesome. Any questions or any stories? I would love to hear if any of you on the call are have a military story or a USO story. I have found that almost every service member that I meet has at least one USO story, whether they were stuck overnight in San Francisco and the USO let them sleep there, or they got to call home when their wife was giving birth to a baby and get to video that with the help of the USO, or they were just at the USO airport in Houston, or at the airport in Houston and stopped by the USO for a snack and a rest. They're all shy today, so I'm not sure.
Are most of your other 3 employees, are there obviously Army or military vets as well?
So mine are, well, 2 of mine are. So Speedy and John are both Army veterans, just like I am. And Terry is a military spouse. That's how she ended up getting involved with the USO. Her husband was and is based at Ellington Field. But that's not necessarily the case. There's quite a few volunteers who are veterans or have children who are in the military and they want to give back, or their spouse was in the military, but there's quite a few people who, for one reason or another, didn't serve and feel like this is their way to give back, to support the mission of the military. You know, folks that were Vietnam aged and couldn't get involved, or at any age, maybe they didn't have that opportunity to serve. And so they've gotten involved with volunteering with the USO. And employees across the USO, I'm not sure what the percentage is of veterans, but it's definitely not everybody. I would know my counterpart in Dallas is not a military veteran, but her grandfather served in World War II, and she has some really great photos of him at the USO and with Bob Hope and things like that. And so, you know, it seems like a lot of people have kind of that connection somehow, but not necessarily all veterans. Yeah.
Is this the time we need to start giving back, especially to our service members? You know, they go through a lot, obviously. Supporting the families, because they're serving just as much as the troops are.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people miss that part of the military. Like, I don't think they realize that the family is also, I don't want to say struggling, but they're, you know, sacrificing. That's right. Yeah. So they need our support just as much as the troops that are active duty.
Sometimes more, honestly. Yeah. So I have a unique situation where I served I'm a veteran of the Army, and I deployed overseas. So my The youngest child was only 5 months old when I left, which was very hard. And my oldest was 2.5, and it was very traumatic for him. My youngest one didn't even remember that I deployed. So although that seemed harder, it was less traumatic on him. But 2 years later, my husband left. And so I got to see the deployment from the other side. And personally, I was in a fairly safe location in Iraq when I deployed. So personally, for me, and my husband would tell you the same thing, it was really harder to be the one home than it was to be the one deployed. Because when you're deployed, you're focused on your mission, you're focused on your troops that you're leading, you're very regimented. You wake up in the morning, you do PT, you get breakfast, you go to work, you get dinner, you work out, and then it's, Groundhog Day, you do it all again the next day. You're just very focused on what needs to happen. When you're home, you're on your own. You don't have that support system. You're sometimes very far away from your home and your family. And you have children, you have issues. As soon as your spouse leaves, the car breaks, the house starts leaking,
Right.
Your kid breaks a leg. I mean, it's Murphy's Law to a T. So I would say in my view, it's oftentimes harder for the family members and spouses to be the one home than it is to be the one deployed. For folks that get, blown up and shot and things, not minimizing that by any means.
Right.
Those are very dangerous places to be.
Well, and also the not knowing.
Yes.
I think that's probably the biggest stress as a spouse or family member at home, is not knowing what's going on.
That's fact.
And we see all these horrible news stories, all the time on the news, and you're like, I know I would be a hot mess.
So
not knowing what's going on. I have a couple of my uncles were in the military. One was in the Army, I think the other was in the Navy.
Okay.
So I have a little bit of military family.
Yeah.
So, for me personally, it wasn't a route for me. But I did a similar military-esque kind of thing. I was in marching band, so it's very regimented and all that stuff. So I get the whole discipline and all that. So I think that's, everybody should respect the military anyway, but just the discipline and, being on time, and, if you're 30 seconds late, you're late.
If you're not 5 minutes early, you're late.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I think America has changed, and I appreciate the fact, obviously I grew up in this era. 9/11, I was just commissioning into the Army. I was a cadet at the time at the University of Kentucky. But being able to talk to so many of the Vietnam veterans who were not respected and were not appreciated. And so a lot of them really, the USO was one of the only places where they felt safe, where they felt respected, where they felt honored and appreciated. Because when they got home, many of them were drafted. And so they didn't choose to get into that. They didn't have a choice, and people treated them very poorly. And so we at the USO have done a good job of not only doing special welcome homes for them now, way too many years later, but welcome homes for those veterans who served during a really hard time. And then of course they're continuing to give back through either volunteering with the USO or other ways, showing their appreciation, which is amazing considering what they went through. And speaking of the spouses and difficulties, one of the major issues that we're seeing on the spouse side is employment. So you can imagine if you move from New York to Texas and you didn't have a job, even if you have a master's degree, people know you're going to leave in 2 years. The employment is very tough. If you're a nurse, you're trying to get certified, or you have a certification process in each state, same for teaching. And so the USO has been doing a lot of work on that transition side, not just with folks getting out of the military, but helping people prepare for when you move, and really promoting remote work. This has been an incredible time for people to realize that remote work is possible, not for everything, but for a lot more things than people thought, where military spouses can continue their job because a lot of them are very highly educated, very organized, as you can imagine, having to move and have, kids and all of those kind of things. And, so that's one of the things that we have really been advocating for, helping with on that. Because it's very hard to survive on a single income for a young soldier and their family at this day and age. So having that second income is really, really important, and being able to help those families do that successfully is really important to us. Yeah.
And I was just kind of piggybacking off of, work from home stuff now. I was talking with a friend over the weekend. Apparently some of these big companies are realizing people can work from home.
Right.
So you could be in Houston,
right,
and there's, a company in New York, maybe a hedge fund company or whatever, looking for some, you could make a New York salary, still living in Houston.
Right.
So, I know that, COVID just kind of threw us all for a loop and turned our world upside down. But I think now we're starting to figure out how to
that it's possible.
navigate.
I mean, we had to figure out that it was possible. And now I think not only companies, but employees are leveraging that to their advantage to say, okay, well, we don't need these gigantic buildings. Sorry to anybody in real estate for big buildings, but, some places it's really important. Obviously, USO centers in airports and pilots can't work from home. My husband is a pilot full-time and a National Guard officer part-time. So he can't work from home. They haven't figured out how to fly planes from home yet.
Well, they can do the unmanned spy thing or the
drones, but not with people yet. I'm not getting on a plane that doesn't have a pilot or two actually in the cockpit. No, thank you. But there are a lot more jobs that you can work from home and be an extreme contributor. Just in Houston, our office is down at Ellington Field. I live on the north side of town, so it's an hour commute each way for me to get to the office. Well, I can do 2 more hours of work if I work from home, as opposed to going to the office, doing the work, and then going out to a center or something along those lines. So, my boss has said, don't waste your time going there every day if you don't need to. Obviously you have staff meetings and things you have to have, but there's not a set need for so many people to go in, spend that time on the road. I mean, you think about carbon emissions that can be cut, so many benefits to the society and to the people, to just having a better quality of life. Yeah.
I know we might be getting a little off topic, but there is I'm a big documentary person on Apple TV. Sir, I forgot his first name, Attenborough.
Oh, I don't know.
He usually narrates the Planet Earth documentary series. So they did one on the year the world changed, meaning COVID stopped. So there was one instance in, I think it was in India. They were 12 days, it took 12 days for the smog to lift from the city. And when the smog lifted, the city went crazy because they saw the Himalayan mountains for the first time in a generation.
Oh my gosh.
So it's stuff like that. It's, realizing what things we do day to day, how it's affecting
the world, all of us,
and just finding those ways to figure out the carbon emissions thing and, try to get a better quality life for everyone, because breathing in that horrible air and all that stuff. So
both of my kids had asthma as children. And so we would have to watch for those high O2 days and keep them inside. I mean, because there's so many allergens in Houston, we keep the windows closed and we just run the air conditioning all the time. And it makes it harder when, you're constantly pumping all of that stuff into the environment. Plus the drive is much longer.
Yeah.
But when it came to COVID, so we had our service members who were deploying had to quarantine for a longer period of time. And after they did their final training before they were getting ready to leave for everywhere across the world. We had folks going to Egypt and Japan and Kuwait and Afghanistan, all over the place out of the Houston area. And normally after they do their final training, they get a week or two with their family before they push out and leave. And of course they couldn't do that. They couldn't risk that.
Yeah.
And so we were able to bring in USO assets. We brought in some comedians, we brought in some bands, we brought in some gaming tournaments, because apparently that's what 18-year-olds like to do. It's not my forte, but luckily I have people that know how to help with that kind of stuff, because I don't. But it just really showed the impact of how important it was for the morale of our troops to have the USO available, because the government doesn't have budget money to support morale things like that. They have budget money for Humvees and body armor and language training, which are all incredibly important. But also the morale of our troops, that can make a huge difference in how well they are prepared mentally and physically to go do whatever their job is and to support the freedom of the United States. So just thinking of COVID and how that has really impacted everyone across the world. But I mean, these folks already sacrifice years and months of their lives away from their family, and this just increased that sacrifice for both the families and the service members. And it was really, once we shut down our centers in the airports because nobody was traveling, so it didn't make sense for us to put volunteers at risk or have those centers open. We were looking at, okay, how do we continue to do our mission and to be always by their side? And that was how we were able to step in some of those instances, and of course, socially distanced, masked up, all of the safety things, but we were able to bring a little bit of morale support to those service members before they left on their mission.
Now, what about when they come back, like during COVID, like do they quarantine still 2 weeks before they get back with their family, or is that like a personal call on their part?
So it depends on the unit, and it depends where they're going and where they're coming from. I mean, it's all dependent, but generally speaking, when soldiers come back from overseas, they have to do a debriefing process. So they go through medical, they go through, turn in of stuff. They have to ensure finance is correct because they have to turn off different pieces of bonuses and stuff that they get for being overseas. And so they go through that process stateside, and then they go back to their families. So there's usually at least a few days, but they haven't been doing a quarantine specific process just because they're still going to be with the same amount of people. So I don't know that would help with trying to mitigate much. And then, vaccines were offered. They were not mandated, but they were offered through the Department of Defense as soon as possible, because those were some of our most frontline workers, whether they were overseas doing mission or they were here stateside giving out vaccines or giving out tests, or even working in the food banks. So when the food banks are run by volunteers, much like the USO is, and so when they couldn't bring volunteers in for safety reasons, the military and National Guard actually stepped in and worked in those food banks, making sure that those most vulnerable people had food throughout the Houston area, which is very cool. Texans helping Texans.
That's right.
That's what they do.
That's what we do.
Well, awesome.
All right. Anyone else in internet land?
Last call for questions.
Right.
You guys can always find us if you're interested in getting involved at houston.uso.org. Probably should put that on this slide, but it's houston.uso.org gets you to our local area, and you can find all the information that you're looking for about what we do, who we are, how you can get involved, and any questions that you have, you can find me there. Awesome. Well, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Loren. I'm going to take myself off mute. All right. So thank you again, Loren, for sharing all this incredible information about the USO. As I mentioned before, we do need to support our troops and their families during every day, because they do fight for our freedom, and that's what makes America America. So again, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending today. The next one is going to be on June the 15th. We're going to do another cooking demonstration with Chef Peter. So it's Breeze into Summer with Chef Peter. And on the menu, we are gonna make a smoked chicken Cobb salad with avocado dressing and heirloom tomatoes, and a Summer Breeze vodka strawberry lemonade cocktail. So I'm just gonna have probably the cocktail next time. So I'll be sending out a flyer for that next event and everything. So if you'd like to join, just make sure you RSVP. And again, thank you for joining today, and stay safe. And even though you're vaccinated, you have an option of wearing your mask. I'm gonna wear my mask all the time until everything is clear. So have a great rest of the afternoon, everyone, and I will see you guys next month. Thank you.